Captain Dae-ho Kim wiped the red dust from his helmet as he stared at the massive metal door, buried deep in the Martian ground. His team had been digging for 6 months, but nothing had prepared them for this moment. The door was huge, bigger than any building on Earth, and covered with strange symbols that seemed to glow in the dim light of their work lamps. Dr. Sora Park knelt beside the metal surface, running her gloved fingers over the carved writing. She was the best language expert Earth had ever produced, able to read ancient texts from dozens of dead civilizations. But these symbols were different. They looked familiar in a way that made her stomach twist with unease. "The writing is old," she said to Captain Dae-ho, "very old, but I can read some of it. The symbols match patterns from ancient Earth languages, but that should be impossible. These ruins are older than human civilization." Dae-ho watched his team work to open the massive door. They had found the ruins by accident while setting up a new mining station on Mars. The ground sensors had detected metal structures buried 50 feet below the surface. At first they thought it might be an alien outpost, but the deeper they dug, the more human the architecture appeared. When the door finally opened with a deep grinding sound that echoed across the Martian landscape, the team stood in shocked silence. Beyond the entrance lay a vast underground city with buildings that stretched as far as their lights could reach. The construction was clearly human, but the technology was far beyond anything Earth had ever created. Dr. Park led the way into the ruins, her translator device working overtime to process the symbols covering every wall. The further they went, the more disturbed she became. The writing told stories of a great human civilization that had ruled among the stars long before Earth had even developed writing. "We need to see this, Captain Dae-ho," she called from deeper in the complex. Her voice carried a tone he had never heard from her, before a mixture of excitement and horror that made him hurry to catch up. She stood before a wall covered in detailed star maps showing the locations of thousands of human colonies, scattered across multiple galaxies. Each colony was marked with population numbers, resource data, and status reports. But it was the central map that made Dae-ho's blood run cold. Earth was there, marked clearly as the origin point of human civilization, but it was crossed out with symbols that Dr. Park translated as abandoned, condemned, forgotten. The date markers showed the abandonment had happened exactly 5,000 years ago. They found the record chambers deeper in the complex, vast rooms, filled with crystal storage, devices that still held their data after 500,000 years. Dr. Park worked feverishly to translate the files, while Captain Dae-ho organized his team to document everything they found. The truth that emerged from those ancient records was more horrible than any alien invasion story. Long ago, Earth had been the center of a massive human empire that spanned 12 galaxies. The humans who lived among the stars had technology that could move planets, create artificial suns, and extend life for thousands of years, but something terrible had threatened the solar system 500,000 years ago. A massive asteroid storm was heading directly for Earth, promising to destroy all life on the planet. The space-dwelling humans had the technology to stop it easily, but instead they made a different choice. Dr. Park found the meeting records from the decision that damned Earth. The space humans, calling themselves the First Dynasty, had voted to abandon their homeworld entirely. The records showed their cold calculations. Earth was primitive, they said, full of humans who had not advanced beyond basic agriculture. Saving Earth would be expensive, and the primitive humans were not worth the cost. So they left. The First Dynasty evacuated only their elite citizens and military personnel, leaving billions of Earth humans to face the asteroid storm alone. The records showed that over 90% of Earth's population died in the impact winter that followed. But the betrayal went even deeper than simple abandonment. The First Dynasty had actively worked to erase Earth from galactic records. They removed all references to humanity's birth world from their databases and told future generations that Earth had been destroyed by natural disasters long before their rise to power. Captain Dae-ho read the final entries, with hands that shook with rage. The First Dynasty had not just left Earth to die, they had stolen humanity's birthright among the stars. They had taken the technology, the knowledge, and the territory that should have belonged to all humans, and claimed it for themselves alone. For 5,000 years, Earth's children had struggled in isolation, believing they were alone in the universe. They had survived Ice Age's plagues, wars, and disasters through pure determination, never knowing that their own people lived in paradise among distant stars. The records showed that the First Dynasty still existed, still ruled their vast empire, still enjoyed the technology and territory they had, stolen from Earth's children. They lived as immortal gods on perfect worlds, while Earth's humans had crawled out of caves and slowly rebuilt civilization from nothing. Dr. Park discovered the navigation data that showed exactly where the first Dynasty worlds could be found. Their empire had grown even larger over the centuries, now controlling resources and territory beyond imagination. They lived lives of perfect comfort and ease, never thinking about the world they had abandoned or the people they had left to die. As Captain Deho prepared to send word back to Earth, he felt a rage burning in his chest, hotter than any Martian dust storm. The discovery changed everything humans had believed about themselves and their place in the universe. They were not alone, and they were not primitive survivors of a dead world. They were the abandoned children of a great civilization, betrayed by their own blood and left to die alone in the dark. But they had survived. They had grown strong through struggle and hardship in ways their pampered cousins among the stars could never understand. The message Captain Deho sent to Earth Command was short, but it carried the weight of 5,000 years of injustice. "We have found our family," he transmitted, "and they left us to die. But we lived. Now they will answer for what they did to us." The ruins of Mars had revealed the greatest crime in human history. The space-dwelling First Dynasty had not just abandoned Earth, they had stolen the future that should have belonged to all humanity. But their crime had also created something they never expected. It had forged Earth's humans into something harder and stronger than their ancestors had ever been. The abandoned children had grown up. They had built their own technology, learned to travel among the stars, and now they knew where their betrayers could be found. The First Dynasty had lived in comfort for 500,000 years, believing their crime was forgotten. They were about to learn how wrong they had been. Admiral Young-Soo Lee stood before the massive screen in the Earth Command Center, watching the faces of world leaders turn pale as they learned the truth about humanity's past. The evidence from Mars filled every display, showing the records of betrayal that had shaped their species for 500,000 years. The revelation hit Earth's population like a physical blow. For generations, humans had looked up at the stars, wondering if they were alone in the universe, dreaming of the day they might meet other intelligent life. Now they knew they were not alone. But the truth was far worse than any nightmare about alien invasion. Their own people had left them to die. President Min-ho Jang was the first to find his voice after the presentation ended. His words were quiet, but they carried the weight of accumulated rage from 2,000 generations of abandoned children. "They knew we would die," he said, "and they did not care. Our own blood chose comfort over family. This cannot stand." Dr. Hee-jin Cho stepped forward with her analysis of the First Dynasty's current status. Her research team had spent weeks studying the ancient records, and the picture they painted was one of unimaginable wealth and power built on the foundation of Earth's suffering. "The First Dynasty now controls 12 galaxies," she reported. "Their technology allows them to live for thousands of years in perfect health. Their worlds have no disease, no poverty, no want of any kind. While we crawled out of caves after the asteroid winter, they danced in crystal palaces among the stars." The numbers were staggering. The First Dynasty controlled over 100,000 inhabited worlds with a total population of nearly 1 trillion humans. Their military forces included weapons that could destroy entire solar systems and shields that could protect whole planets from any attack. They possessed technology so advanced that Earth's greatest achievements looked like stone tools by comparison. But Admiral Young-Soo Lee had studied more than just their strength. He had examined their weakness as well. The First Dynasty had grown soft in their paradise worlds. They had no experience with real hardship, no understanding of true desperation. They fought wars with robots and automated systems because their immortal citizens were too precious to risk in actual combat. Earth's humans were different. Every person alive carried the genetic memory of survival against impossible odds. They had been shaped by abandonment into something their space-dwelling cousins could never understand. Where the First Dynasty had grown weak from comfort, Earth's children had been tempered into an unbreakable weapon. Dr. Kyung-mi Nam presented her preliminary designs for the weapons Earth would need to face their betrayers. The ancient records had revealed many First Dynasty technological secrets, and her team was already working to develop counters for their advanced systems. "We cannot match their numbers," she explained, "but we do not need to. They fight to preserve their perfect lives. We fight for justice for our dead and for the future they stole from us. Desperation makes us stronger than any technology they possess. The preparation began immediately. Every resource on Earth and its colonies was turned toward a single goal. Factories that had made civilian goods were converted to produce warships. Scientists who had studied peaceful applications of technology began designing weapons of unprecedented destruction. The most important development was not technological, but psychological. Earth's population began to understand what they truly were. They were not the lucky survivors of a dead world who had somehow reached the stars through their own efforts. They were the children of giants who had been betrayed by their own parents, but had grown strong enough to demand justice. Dr. Taiwan led the team that reverse-engineered the first dynasties faster than light travel systems. Within 3 years, Earth's ships could cross galactic distances that had once seemed impossible. But the real breakthrough came when they realized their advantages over their pampered cousins. The first dynasty builds for comfort and beauty, reported. Their ships are designed to house immortal passengers in luxury during long journeys. Our ships will be built for war. We do not need crystal gardens and pleasure domes. We need weapons armor and the will to use them. President Min Ho-jung addressed the world as the first battle fleets prepared for launch. His speech was broadcast to every human settlement from Luna to the outer colonies, and his words would be remembered for generations to come. For 500,000 years we believed we were alone, he said. We thought the struggle to survive was the natural condition of humanity. Now we know the truth. While we suffered in darkness, our own people lived in light. While we fought for every scrap of progress, they enjoyed the fruits of technology we should have inherited. They abandoned us to die and then erased us from history to hide their shame. The Idan crowd that filled Earth's capital city and billions watching around the world responded with a roar of rage that seemed to shake the planet itself. This was not just anger at an ancient crime, but the awakening of something deeper. Earth's humans were discovering what they had become through abandonment and struggle. But we did not die, Zhang continued. We survived. We grew strong. We learned that family means something more than shared blood. Family means standing together when darkness comes. Family means never abandoning your own, no matter the cost. We remember what they forgot, and now we will teach them what abandonment truly means. The fleet that launched from Earth 6 months later was unlike anything humanity had ever assembled. Every ship was crewed by volunteers who understood they might not return, but who carried something more valuable than their own lives. They carried the accumulated rage of 2,000 generations and the burning need to balance the scales of justice. Admiral Young-Soo Lee stood on the bridge of the flagship as Earth fell behind them. His crew was young by Earth standards, but ancient in their understanding of what it meant to be truly human. They had been shaped by a world that demanded strength from its children, and they were ready to show their space-dwelling cousins what that strength had created. The journey to first Dynasty space would take 2 years even with their new technology, but Earth's forces used that time to prepare in ways their enemies could never imagine. They trained not just for combat but for the psychological warfare that would break the will of immortals who had never faced real loss. Dr. Sora Park had joined the fleet as a specialist in First Dynasty culture and language. She spent the long months of travel studying their society and finding the cracks that Earth's forces could exploit. The First Dynasty had built their civilization on a lie, and lies made for fragile foundations. They tell their children that Earth was destroyed by natural disasters, she reported to the command staff. They have convinced themselves that abandonment was mercy. When we appear in their space carrying the truth about what they really are, it will shatter their perfect world more surely than any weapon is. The fleet approached the edge of First Dynasty territory. Admiral Young-Soo Lee felt the weight of history on his shoulders. Behind him lay a world that had been forged in the fire of abandonment into something harder and purer than their ancestors had ever been. Ahead lay the descendants of those who had chosen comfort over courage, wealth over loyalty. The abandoned children were coming home, but they came not as refugees begging for acceptance. They came as judges carrying the verdict for 5,000 years of injustice. The First Dynasty had lived in paradise for millennia, believing their crime was forgotten. They were about to discover that some wounds never heal, and some debts must be paid in blood. The First Dynasty patrol ship Eternal Grace glided through the void at the edge of the Andromeda sector, where nothing interesting had happened for over 3,000 years. Captain Nari Seon had been guarding this quiet border for centuries and had grown comfortable with the routine patrols that never encountered anything more dangerous than asteroid miners or lost cargo ships. Her sensor officer suddenly straightened in his chair, his immortal features showing an expression Nari had not seen in decades. "Captain, we have multiple contacts appearing at the system edge," he reported. "The signatures match First Dynasty technology, but the ships are not in our database." Nari felt a chill run through her perfect body as she watched the tactical display fill with unknown vessels. Hundreds of ships had appeared simultaneously using jump drives that produced the exact energy signature of First Dynasty technology. But that was impossible. Every First Dynasty ship was tracked and registered. These vessels simply could not exist. "Open a communication channel," she ordered. "This is Captain Nari Seon of the First Dynasty border. Guard, identify yourselves immediately and explain how you possess our technology without authorization." The response came immediately, and the voice that spoke carried an accent Nari had never heard before. It sounded like ancient First Dynasty language, but rougher, harder, as if shaped by worlds where speaking softly meant not being heard over the wind. "This is Admiral Youngsu Lee of the Earth. Liberation Fleet, we are humanity's children. Abandoned by your ancestors 5,000 years ago on a world you erased from your records. We have come to collect the debt of blood you owe us and to bring justice for the greatest crime in human history." The words hit Nari like physical blows. Earth was a myth from the old stories, a legendary birth world that had supposedly been lost to natural disasters long before the dynasty's rise. But these ships carried weapons and technology that could only come from advanced human civilization. "Impossible," she whispered, but her sensor readings told a different story. The ships were crewed entirely by humans whose genetic markers matched First Dynasty patterns but showed mutations, consistent with evolution on a high radiation world under extreme survival pressure. "We know this seems impossible to you," Admiral Lee's voice continued, "but we have proof of everything we claim. We have the records your ancestors left on Mars showing exactly how they voted to abandon Earth, rather than spend resources to save it. We have the meeting transcripts where they called us primitive and expendable. We have the evidence of every lie you have told your children about our destruction." Captain Nari sent an emergency transmission to Dynasty Command while her crew listened in growing horror to the Earth Fleet's broadcast. The transmission was being sent on all frequencies, ensuring that every human in Dynasty space would hear the accusations being made against their perfect civilization. "Your ancestors had the power to save Earth from the asteroid storm but chose to let billions die. Instead, they heard, while you built paradise worlds, we crawled out of caves and rebuilt civilization from nothing. While you extended your lives for millennia, we died young, fighting for every scrap of progress. You stole our birthright and our future, then erased us from history to hide your shame." The Dynasty High Council convened an emergency session on New Genesis, their capital world. Elder So-Jin Park, who had lived for over 8,000 years, felt memories stirring that she had thought were safely buried in the past. The old stories did speak of a world called Earth, but those were just legends from the early days of expansion. The council chambers filled with the most powerful humans in the galaxy, all of them struggling to process what they were hearing. The Earth Fleet's demands were being broadcast on every channel in Dynasty space, and the words were spreading panic through their perfect society. "Demand the complete surrender of all First Dynasty worlds," the broadcast continued. "We demand the return of all technology stolen from Earth's children. We demand reparations for 500,000 years of abandonment. Most importantly, we demand that specific individuals be held accountable for the ancient betrayal. We have your genetic records. We know which bloodlines voted for abandonment and which families built their wealth on our suffering." Elder Min Q, current head of the High Council, tried to maintain calm, but his voice shook as he addressed his fellow leaders. "Even if these claims are true," he said, "the events they describe happened 500,000 years ago. Current generations cannot be held responsible for ancient decisions made by ancestors they never knew." The Earth Fleet's response came immediately, as if they had been listening to the Council's private discussions. "You inherited the benefits of betrayal," they heard. "Every comfortable day you have lived, every advanced technology you have used, every perfect world you have inhabited was built on the foundation of our abandonment. You cannot claim innocence while living in luxury purchased with our suffering." General Haiwan Kim, commander of the Dynasty's military forces, studied the tactical displays with growing concern. The Earth fleet was larger than initial reports had suggested, and their formation suggested they had extensive experience with space combat. More disturbing were the energy readings from their weapon systems, which showed power levels that should have been impossible for ships of their size. They are not using our technology, General Kim reported to the Council. They have developed their own systems based on the same principles but designed for very different purposes. Our ships are built for comfort and long journeys. Their ships appear to be built for nothing but war. The first attempt at negotiation came when Elder Sojin Park herself traveled to meet with the Earth fleet. She brought gifts of incredible value, entire star systems, wealthy beyond imagination, and offers of advanced technology that could solve every problem Earth might face. Admiral Young-soo Lee received her aboard his flagship in a conference room that was clearly designed for function rather than beauty. The Earth Admiral looked younger than many Dynasty citizens, but his eyes carried a weight of experience that made the ancient elder feel like a child. "We offer you wealth beyond your wildest dreams," Elder Park began. "Entire worlds perfect for colonization technology that will extend your lives for millennia, resources that will make Earth the richest world in the galaxy. All we ask is that you forget these ancient grievances and join us in building a better future." Admiral Lee listened to her offer without expression, then stood and activated a holographic display that filled the room with images of Earth's history. Elder Park watched in horror as the display showed her exactly what 500,000 years of abandonment had cost. She saw the asteroid impact that had killed 9 billion people while her ancestors danced in crystal palaces. She saw the ice age that followed, where humans had eaten bark and roots to survive, while her people feasted on delicacies from 1,000 worlds. She saw the plagues and wars that had ravaged Earth while her civilization lived in perfect health and peace. "You cannot buy forgiveness for genocide," Admiral Lee said quietly. "You cannot purchase absolution for abandoning your own blood. We did not cross half the universe for your gold. We came for justice, and justice cannot be bought or bargained away." The negotiations lasted exactly 1 hour before Admiral Lee stood to leave. His final words to Elder Park became legend throughout Dynasty space and beyond. "Your ancestors made a choice 500,000 years ago," he told her. "They chose comfort over courage, wealth over loyalty, paradise over family. They thought Earth would die quietly and take their shame with it into the dark. They were wrong." As the Elder's ship departed, the Earth fleet began deploying into battle formation. Their movements were precise and practice, showing they had drilled extensively for this moment. More ships continued to arrive from the direction of Earth until the fleet numbered in the thousands. The Dynasty's military prepared their defenses, but intelligence reports brought disturbing news. The Earth ships were crewed by humans who showed no fear of death, who fought with a savagery that immortal Dynasty warriors found incomprehensible. These were not the primitive survivors the Dynasty had expected. Captain Narisian watched from her patrol ship as the 2 greatest human civilizations in the galaxy prepared for war. Her perfect world was about to be shattered by truths that had been buried for 500,000 years. The abandoned children had returned, and they brought with them the fury of 500,000 years of unanswered cries for help. The first shots were fired at the Battle of Proxima, gate where Earth forces encountered a Dynasty fortress that guarded one of their major trade routes. The fortress had shields that could stop any known weapon and defenses that had never been breached in 3,000 years of service. Earth's forces ignored the shields entirely. Instead, they rammed their ships directly into the fortress, each vessel's crew fighting to the death to create openings for the next wave. The fortress fell in 6 hours, destroyed by humans who treated their own lives as ammunition to be spent in pursuit of justice. News of the battle spread through Dynasty space like wildfire. For the first time in millennia, their perfect civilization faced an enemy that could not be reasoned with, bought, or intimidated. The abandoned children had grown strong in darkness, and they had finally come home to balance the scales of justice. The Trial of Worlds began exactly 1 year after the last Dynasty military force surrendered to Earth's liberation fleet. Admiral Young-soo Lee had chosen the date carefully to mark the anniversary of humanity's greatest discovery on Mars, when they first learned of their abandonment. Now justice would finally be served to those who had committed the ultimate betrayal. Mobile courts were established on captured dynasty worlds presided over by judges who carried more than legal authority in their decisions. Each judge was chosen from families whose genetic records showed the clearest markers of survival trauma, passed down through 2,000 generations of struggle. They were living proof of what abandonment had cost, and their verdicts carried the weight of ancestral pain. Chief Justice Inho Seo oversaw the primary tribunal on New Genesis, where the most senior dynasty leaders would face judgment. The courtroom was built in the ruins of the Crystal Palace, where ancient dynasty councils had voted to abandon Earth. Every piece of broken crystal served as a reminder of how completely their perfect world had fallen. Elder Kyung-suk, the dynasty's eldest living leader, was brought before the court in chains forged from the metal of destroyed Earth colonies. At 12,000 years old, she was one of the few who remembered the transition period when dynasty historians had systematically erased all references to Earth from their records. The charges read against her and the other dynasty leadership spanned millennia of accumulated crimes. Abandonment of duty to family and species, conspiracy to commit genocide through deliberate neglect, theft of technological heritage that belonged to all humanity, systematic erasure of Earth's existence from galactic records to hide their crime. Dr. Hyojin Cha served as chief prosecutor for Earth's tribunal, carrying evidence that had been gathered from dynasty archives across 12 galaxies. Her presentation lasted for days, as she methodically destroyed every justification the dynasty had ever offered for their ancestors' actions. The asteroid storm that threatened Earth 500,000 years ago could have been easily deflected using dynasty technology, she testified. Internal communications showed dynasty leaders discussing the threat as an opportunity rather than a crisis. They used it as an excuse to cut ties with a homeworld they viewed as an embarrassment to their perfect civilization. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Dynasty leaders had not made a desperate wartime decision to save resources for military operations. They had made a calculated choice in comfortable council chambers surrounded by luxury beyond imagination. They had looked at Earth's suffering population and decided those lives were not worth the cost of salvation. Elder Kyung-suk tried to defend her ancestors' actions during her testimony, but her words only deepened the court's anger. The people of Earth were primitive, she claimed. They had not advanced beyond basic agriculture while we had built cities among the stars. Saving them would have cost enormous resources for people who could not contribute to our civilization's progress. Chief Justice Inho Seo's response became legendary throughout human space. The primitive people you abandoned built this courtroom where you now stand in chains, he said. The worthless humans you left to die created the technology that brought us across the galaxy to find you. Your ancestors thought we would disappear quietly into history. Instead, we became your judges. The psychological testimony proved most devastating to dynasty morale throughout their former empire. Dr. Sunmi Baek, Earth's leading expert on genetic trauma, demonstrated how abandonment had literally changed human evolution over 2,000 generations. Earth's population carries markers of survival stress in their very DNA, she explained to the court. These markers were passed from parent to child, creating permanent. The Battle of Proxima Gate became the first lesson in what happened when the abandoned children of Earth met their pampered cousins among the stars. Commander Jae-hyun Choi led the Earth Vanguard against the dynasty's supposedly perfect fortress world, watching his tactical display fill with energy, readings that should have meant certain death for his fleet. The Proxima Gate fortress had shields that could absorb the energy output of an entire star. Its automated defense systems could track and destroy 1,000 targets simultaneously. The dynasty forces manning the station had never lost a battle in 3,000 years of service, and they watched Earth's approach with confident superiority. What they saw next would haunt dynasty military doctrine for generations to come. Earth ships did not attempt to break through the shields or outmaneuver the defenses. Instead, they flew directly into the barriers at maximum speed, using their own destruction as weapons against the fortress walls. Commander Choi's voice echoed across the battlefield as his ship prepared for final impact. We are the children they left to die, he broadcast on all frequencies. We learned that death is just another tool of war. Today we teach them what abandonment truly costs. The first wave of Earth ships struck the fortress shields and exploded in brilliant flashes that sent shockwaves through the barrier systems. The second wave followed, immediately aiming for the weak points created by their predecessors' sacrifice. Wave after wave crashed into the fortress, each crew member choosing death over failure. General Boram, Yu coordinated the assault from her command ship, studying the dynasty's response with the cold calculation of someone who had learned strategy in a school where losing meant extinction. The dynasty defenders were fighting to preserve their extended lives always, seeking survival over victory. Earth's forces had turned survival instinct into a fatal weakness by embracing death as simply another tactic to be employed. When dynasty soldiers faced humans who viewed their own lives as ammunition, the psychological impact was more devastating than any weapon could have been. The fortress fell in 18 hours after defenses that had never been breached were systematically destroyed by crews who treated suicide attacks as routine military procedure. The surviving dynasty forces surrendered, not because they were defeated, but because they could not comprehend an enemy that fought without regard for self-preservation. The Siege of New Genesis began 3 weeks later when Earth's main battle fleet surrounded the dynasty's capital world. General Boram Yu studied the planet from orbit, noting the crystal spires and floating gardens that showed how completely the dynasty had forgotten what struggle meant. "We will not bombard their cities," she announced to her commanders. "We will not target their military installations or government buildings. Instead, we will destroy every symbol of the comfort they built on our suffering. We will tear down their paradise piece by piece and make them watch." Colonel Dong Wu Kang led the atmospheric strikes that began dismantling New Genesis from orbit. His pilots targeted the pleasure gardens where dynasty immortals had relaxed while Earth burned. They destroyed the art museums filled with treasures looted from conquered worlds. They shattered the crystal palaces where ancient leaders had voted to abandon their own people. Each target was chosen not for military value but for psychological impact. Earth forces wanted the dynasty to understand what it felt like to watch everything beautiful in your world disappear while you stood helpless to prevent it. They wanted them to feel the same despair Earth's children had known for 5,000 years. Elder Youngmi, Lee speaking for the High Council, tried desperately to negotiate from the council chambers beneath New Genesis. She offered complete autonomy for Earth, recognition of their independence, and massive reparations paid over centuries. Her words were broadcast across dynasty space as a final plea for peace. Admiral Young-Soo Lee responded from his flagship orbiting directly above the dynasty capital. His words were heard by every human in both civilizations, and they carried the weight of accumulated injustice that stretched across millennia. "You still do not understand," he said. "This is not about what you can give us now. This is about what you took from us 500,000 years ago. You stole our ancestors' chance to live among the stars. You stole our birthright. You stole the lives of billions who died alone while you lived in paradise. Some debts can only be paid in blood." Dr. Sung-Ho Park, the dynasty's chief scientist, made a discovery that changed everything as the war progressed. Earth's humans were not just angry about ancient abandonment. Evolution and struggle had literally changed them into something new and terrifying. The brain scans of captured Earth soldiers showed neural pathways unknown in dynasty citizens. These pathways had been created by 2,000 generations of survival pressure, where weakness meant death, and only the strongest traits were passed to children. Earth's humans had become a different species bred for war hardship and the kind of desperate courage their space-dwelling cousins had forgotten. "We are not fighting other humans," Dr. Park reported to the High Council. "We are fighting what humans become when they are abandoned to struggle alone for 500,000 years. They have evolved beyond our understanding into something harder and more dangerous than we could have imagined." The turning point came when Earth forces captured their first dynasty immortal alive. Commander Ari Han had lived for 6,000 years and commanded fleets that had conquered entire star systems. But she broke under Earth's interrogation methods not from physical torture, but from something far worse. Earth's interrogators forced her to confront the true consequences of her ancestors' betrayal. They showed her detailed records of every plague war and disaster that had ravaged Earth, while the dynasty lived in comfort. They made her watch holographic recreations of children dying in the asteroid winter while her people danced in crystal palaces. The recordings of Commander Han's breakdown were broadcast throughout dynasty space as part of a prisoner exchange. Her words shattered the morale of immortal warriors, who had never questioned their Civilization's foundations, we are not the heroes. Of this story she told her people through tears that an immortal should never have been able to shed. We are the monsters. We abandoned our own blood, and then convinced ourselves we were saving them. Earth's children do not hate us for being different. They hate us for being weak, for choosing comfort over loyalty, for proving that power without honor creates something worse than any alien threat could ever be. The psychological warfare proved more effective than any physical weapon. Dynasty soldiers began surrendering rather than face enemies who carried the genetic memory of abandonment in their very bones. Entire fleets defected rather than fight against humans whose every breath was a testament to survival against impossible odds. Admiral Young Soo Lee established mobile command centers on captured dynasty worlds, turning their own perfect cities into bases for the continuing war. Earth's engineers studied dynasty technology, not to copy it but to understand its weaknesses and develop counters for systems that had seemed invincible. The dynasty military tried one final, desperate gambit, assembling their largest fleet ever seen for a direct assault on Earth itself. General Haewon Kim led 1,000,000 ships toward humanity's birth world, intending to hold it hostage in exchange for peace negotiations. The fleet never reached Earth. Admiral Young Soo Lee's forces intercepted them at the edge of the solar system, and the battle that followed became known as the Slaughter of the Titans. Dynasty forces discovered that Earth's home system was defended not just by military vessels, but by every human who could hold a weapon. Civilian cargo ships rammed Dynasty battlecruisers. Mining vessels loaded with explosives crashed into command ships. Even children and training fighters joined the battle, treating their own deaths as acceptable losses if they could damage the enemy. The Dynasty fleet was annihilated in 36 hours with less than 1%, escaping to bring word of their defeat back to Dynasty space. General Haewon Kim's final transmission before his flagship was destroyed carried a warning that echoed throughout the remaining Dynasty worlds. We thought they were primitive because they had less technology than us, he broadcast. We were wrong. Technology does not make a civilization. Struggle makes a civilization. Earth's children became something we could never understand because we forgot what it means to fight for survival. We forgot what it means to be truly human. As Dynasty resistance crumbled across 12 galaxies, Admiral Young Soo Lee stood on the bridge of his flagship looking out at stars that should have belonged to all humanity from the beginning. The abandoned children had proven themselves the stronger branch of the human tree, but victory brought no joy, only the bitter satisfaction of justice finally served. The war was ending, but the reckoning had only just begun. Earth's forces had demonstrated that they could defeat the Dynasty militarily, but the real punishment would be making their pampered cousins understand exactly what price abandonment demanded. The blood debt was being collected one world at a time, and the Dynasty was learning that some crimes could never be forgiven, only balanced by consequences that matched their scope. The children who had been left to die alone were ensuring that abandonment would never happen again in any corner of the galaxy.